So the community at Wolfson is exceptionally diverse. We have people from so many different countries and backgrounds.
Hi everyone, my name is Dan, I'm from Brazil.
Hello, I'm Michaela, I'm from South Africa.
I'm Arjun, I'm from Singapore.
I'm from the United States.
I am from the Philippines.
I'm originally from Yorkshire.
I'm from Shropshire. I'm from Mexico.
I was born in Washington, D.C., but actually grew up all over the world. I spent 6 years in Côte d'Ivoire, West Africa, and 10 years in Tunisia before going back to the U.S.
I'm from Montreal, so I'm French-Canadian.
I come from Jerusalem, Israel.
You know, we have so many different people from different countries, different nationalities, different ethnicities.
Yeah. I really don't know a country from which I haven't met someone.
It's like traveling around the world a little bit.
Everybody is also from somewhere else.
Yes.
Because it's such an international community.
Yeah. But you get so many more interesting conversations with people from wherever, and you also get really good holidays. I'm going to Jordan next month to visit a wolf.
A wolf.
A wolf.
All right, thank you everyone. It's yet another series of Wolfson Entrepreneurial Society events. And today we are really thrilled to be bringing you an amazing topic, something that has been burning in our mind, which is going to be on impact investing and sustainability through entrepreneurship. And we have an amazing speaker today who has joined us to share his view and his journey, both as an entrepreneur, as someone who's been all and around when it comes to making investments that are going to be impactful, looking into sustainability and all have you. So, but before we get started, I usually like to take a couple of minutes to say one or two things about Wolfson Entrepreneurial Society in case this is your first time of joining us. So Wolfson Entrepreneurial Society actually started in 2019 at Wolfson College. And one of the reasons why we've started that is because of the growing interest of students, alumni at Wolfson College here at the University of Cambridge. And so you can imagine the video you've watched now before we came live. You've seen that Wolfson College is exceptionally diverse. Every year we have over 90 countries represented at Wolfson College. So you can imagine the wealth of experience that these individuals that comes to Cambridge at Wolfson College to study will always bring. So we decided to tap into that resource that we have in that close community that we have at Wolfson, to tap into these several experiences and ideas that these people are bringing to form this society. And since then, we are really grateful that we've been supported by the community. We've been able to interact, support each other to fast track both career, startup companies and what have you. And so as our tradition, one of those things that we run bi-weekly is to have panel speakers, bring speakers on board to share their journey, their entrepreneurial experience, their academic, what have you. And so today we are going to be focusing on impact investing and sustainability through entrepreneurship. And so unlike what we have before, we usually spend a couple of, maybe 1 hour interacting with our panelists, and then we have 30 minutes for questions and answers from the audience. But today we are going to slightly change things a bit. For the first 30 minutes, we're going to listen to Robin sharing a whole lot of details using a slide for us. And then the next 30 minutes, I'm going to engage Robin in the whole discussion based on what he's shared, as well as any other things, the questions we've received from audience before this. And then the last 30 minutes of this event, we'll now start looking at questions that our audience are going to start bringing in. So I want to tell you why the presentations are going on, why we are making the interaction for the first 30 minutes. Please, if you have any question, put them there in the chat box. We are streaming live on Twitter, on YouTube, as well as Facebook. So wherever you are watching us from, just try to put whatever question you have. We'll be able to see those questions here live, and then Robin will be able to take charge of them at the end. So without further ado, Robin, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then make a first couple of minutes presentation before we move into discussion.
David, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. The Wolfson Entrepreneurship Society I must confess, is a new thing from my point of view. Wolfson is a very important part of my history and my career, And so the fact that the college and the student community is really embracing entrepreneurship as part of that journey is great. So it's great to be here. My background is, I kind of got to where I am by accident. I think, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I started off thinking I wanted a particular career. In my case, it was in manufacturing. And then 2 or 3 jobs into my career, I ended up working at Cambridge. And I'm not on my own in being seduced by startups and by particularly the commercialization of technology, being immersed in the Cambridge environment. So I moved away from working in and with big companies into working with the very young companies, and also with academics. So after Cambridge, I went to London Business School and ran a joint venture they had with UCL, for example, focused on commercializing technology. And I've kind of a series of day jobs in that kind of environment. And then in parallel to that, I got involved with quite a large number of startups and young companies, either as an investor or an advisor, a co-founder, and it's been an interesting ride, and every day is different. So I guess it's kind of preaching to the choir, I guess, to say that it's an interesting and exciting and stimulating career to have. It's not always easy, but I guess that's the point. If it were, everybody would do it. So what I wanted to do tonight was to really share some thoughts and 1 or 2 perspectives when it comes to impact investing, which I've arrived at relatively recently, I guess, in the last 4 or 5 years, and stimulated by, it's been kind of a collision of 2 worlds that I've been involved with. One has been the smart cities world, which I'll talk a little bit about, and then more recently, how we might apply some of those approaches and explore some commercial opportunities that you might think of as being essentially urban in more natural environments. And of course, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We have a climate crisis. We have social problems around the world. There's no shortage of big challenges to face. And impact investing has an important role to play. So really what I wanted to do was I kind of just hopefully stimulate some thoughts and some ideas and some questions. And then, David, as you're saying, we can explore those in the time we have. So what I want to do is run through some slides fairly quickly. I'm going to, David, shout if this doesn't behave itself as it did.
Yeah, sure.
Before. And let me just go to slides and then, all right.
Okay, cool. Yes.
And now you go to the next one, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm not even going to click the stop sharing at the bottom. So apologies, everyone. Let's get going. So impact investing and sustainability through entrepreneurship. An alternative title I thought would be making money by solving intractable problems, a bit like this PowerPoint presentation, which I've been kind of drawn to over the years, one way or another. And I think the first thing that I'd like to really highlight, which many of you will know, is that impact investing is about focusing on outcomes and outputs that are not only financial, but are about environmental and social as well. But they really are about making money. And if we look at challenges like climate change, for example, then and you talk to serious investors, they are in it to make money. And any solution has to be sustainable financially, first and foremost, if it's going to be sustainable in any way at all. So that was something that actually I learned over a period of time. When I first started to hear about impact investing, I was thinking about it more in some ways as philanthropy. And there's a spectrum, of course, and sometimes it can be. But increasingly, the commercial opportunities are being really recognized and people taking advantage of that. I'm not going to give a lot of advice tonight, but the first one would be that really don't get into it unless you have a significant appetite for failure and are ready to be knocked back time and time again. Because first of all, the challenges are big and complex, and I'll come back to that in a second. But also often both other investors, the investor market, corporates, all the stakeholders that you might want to engage, often need to be educated first and foremost in the nature of the problem and how it might be addressed. Quite often, I find that investors and others look at big problems and they try to find point solutions to specific parts of the challenge, when actually the challenges are system-wide. And so much more of a systems approach is often required. And that's quite a consultative sell from an entrepreneurship point of view. And in a world where cash is king, and raising money and writing invoices are really first and are front of mind, then sitting back and taking time to go through these challenges in the more systemic way can take quite a lot of nerve, but it really is worth it in the end. So, as I said right at the beginning, I'm going to go through a bit of my career history, touching on smart cities, which I've been involved with for the last 10 years or so, and then more natural environments, which has come more recently, but where I found really some quite interesting overlaps and synergies. So many of you will probably be familiar with this graphic by Zorif, who developed it to describe the process of getting a PhD. It's kind of a nice little graphic for that, but the way I look at it, it could be equally applicable for why you might start a business. You have an idea, you explore it, you get more and more involved in understanding what the challenges are, what the business model might be, how the value chains work, and so on. And then you get down to really reaching the boundary of what people have done before. And that's, of course, what an entrepreneur does. They find new ways to do difficult and interesting things. And then on this graphic, you'll see bottom left, eventually the boundary gives way. And what you have, if you're doing a PhD, is you've got your PhD and you've added to the field of human understanding, the field of human knowledge, and that's your little contribution right there. And if you started a business, that's your new business right there. Now, having been through all that pain and that process, the penultimate box here shows you that the world can look a bit different to you now from where you started. You've got a very specific view. You're wrapped up in your business. You're focused on addressing the challenges that you wanted to address in the first place. The danger is forgetting the bigger picture. So my first takeaway, I guess, would be context is everything. Whether it's academic research, and certainly in investing and in impact investing in particular, I'd argue, the broader context is so critically important for a number of reasons, which I'll run through in the next few minutes. I don't need to tell everyone that we're living in an interesting time, huge challenges facing us. This picture, as you'll know, is called Earthrise. It was taken during the Apollo mission. Since this picture was taken, we've lost 50% of the animals in monitored ecosystems around the world. That's 50% of wild animals in monitored ecosystems have gone in the last almost 50 years. Now, that really is a signal. It's more than the canary in the coal mine. It's a sign that we need to be doing things differently and indeed doing different things. And that's what impact investing is all about. Now, we've made some progress in understanding what some of these opportunities might look like, and you'll be aware of the UN SDGs, which have really been quite useful. It's a useful guide. If you're starting a business or you're thinking about impact investing, then identifying 1, 2, or maybe 3 of these as focal areas could make a lot of sense. They're not perfect. And one of the weaknesses, one of the challenges we have with these is that the way they're depicted. They're depicted as individual boxes, when in fact, of course, the issues that they represent are very cross-cutting, cross-disciplinary. The boundaries are very fuzzy. Now, if we come back to our PhD or our new business, and we're asking, well, why would we bother to do this? Everyone has different reasons for doing it. In the case of the person who developed this graphic, their son was ill. they embarked on a program of medical research with a very specific goal. If we're talking about impact investment, it might be that, or starting a business in an impact investment kind of world, then it may be we've got a particular personal interest in climate change or in social issues, or in any number of areas. But the thing always to remember is that everything is connected. You have your own specific focus and you need to invest 100% in that to make a difference. But losing sight of the broader picture can be dangerous. This is a graphic that illustrates the way different fields of research interact with one another. This is a map of journal cross-citations. I don't need to read it to you. Each node represents a subdiscipline between the key disciplines there. Now, this is frozen in time. It's a picture and it changes over time. But it's an interesting representation, I think, of the complexity of the world in which we live. This is a scientific research type view of the world, but it's equally applicable in terms of professional practice or in terms of some of the impact investment targets we might be thinking of. Now, when I first got involved or started to get involved and get interested in smart cities, it was the complexity that attracted me in some ways. I thought this is a really fascinating set of challenges. Cities are where the battle for climate change will be won and lost. It's where socioeconomic problems and divides really start to hit home. It's where construction is probably the least advanced manufacturing sector, I would argue, in the world, is responsible for huge amounts of carbon on our planet, not only in the way that cities are designed and built, but the way they're operated as well. And depending on how you look at cities, then these problems manifest themselves in different ways. This picture is how we would see the city, a city. Others would see it like this, a very sort of technological, digital architecture type view of the world. Quite two-dimensional in some ways, but really designed to start to simplify it and break it down into a level where a code developer might be able to write some programs to start to connect some of these interrelated activities. Slightly more humanizing view of it. This is Microsoft's view of the world, where they slice the city into layers with technology at the bottom, and then various slices of activity with people and processes there, and then the physical environment at the top. And this is where the smart cities world has been focused from a technology point of view for many years. The focus on interconnecting middleware that orchestrates citizen services, monitors environmental performance in real time, integrated mobility, and then ultimately can start to think about connecting these things together. It's kind of the Sim City approach. And it's useful, but actually, as we all know, this isn't really what cities is about either. Cities are about people, and people really are all connected. In the middle of COVID has really brought home how connected the world is. We all knew the world was shrinking because of digital technologies and communication type technologies, but through travel and of course COVID and viruses and other pandemics that will come take advantage of that. One important point I wanted to mention is that in impact investing, depending where you sit in the world and your background, and Wolfson type of environment is atypical because it is so international. But in investing generally, it's a very Western Northern Hemisphere view of the world that people take, and it's a mistake because the challenges that we face in our cities, as an example, manifests itself in all sorts of different ways. This is I forget which town. It may be Cape Town. It's a town in South Africa, a city in South Africa. People queuing recently for sanitizer as COVID was really starting to take hold. Now, this, believe it or not, this is a very serious health emergency, of course, but people will be making a lot of money. Firms will make a lot of money, not only out of COVID, but about developing solutions to try and deflect or minimize or manage the impact of pandemics in the future as well. And those that are successful will be the ones that recognize that the problem isn't about this line of people with no PPE available to them queuing for hand sanitizers. It's about a whole range of interconnected effects that leads to this kind of situation happening. So the question for an impact investor is, if I think about the outcome that I want to achieve, if I want to think about the way in which the daily lives of citizens in any city around the world might be improved, then how might I place my investment for maximum impact? Now, if we come back to this diagram again and think about it from an investor's point of view, then hidden by the stop sharing tab, it says who invests and who profits. Now, in the smart cities world, this remains the most significant barrier to really driving forward on city and urban related challenges. It might be to the health services interest, to the NHS's interest in the UK, for example, to clean up air quality. But the car companies have to invest in the technology in order for that to happen, for electrification to happen, as an example. Now, legislation has an important part to play, of course, as a lever in moving some of these things forward. But the linkages between where the investment is made and how it's made, and then where the profits emerge, is often very complex. And aligning investors and the outcomes that investors want from their investments, aligning that with the visions that city leaders have and citizens have for where they want to live and how they want to live, is one of the great challenges. And quite often, all too often, investment accelerates development in the wrong direction, and development happens in the way that it always has. So, as a slightly different way of thinking about this, this is an example of a project that I was involved with 3 or 4 years ago with London City Airport. And very briefly, the challenge that the airport set was that they wanted to extend the experience of traveling through London City Airport to the whole customer journey experience. So when you're going to travel somewhere, those of us who remember getting on planes and traveling around, the journey actually starts at the point when you know that you have to travel somewhere. And the planning and the experience, the whole journey experience, starts then and it ends when you return. The airport's initial view was they wanted to brand Citymap or an equivalent app for real-time deals through their platform. We took a very different view with them and convinced them to remain completely technology agnostic and think exclusively about how people felt during the journey, and focus on removing the bumps in the road and the friction and the difficulties that people experience traveling to the airport, and then through the airport all the way through to boarding and beyond. The beauty of forgetting about what the solution might be and focusing only on the problem means that suddenly anything is possible. And what it meant was that it became much easier to find a way through this very complex set of challenges to a new set of value chains that would add value and improve the quality of the passenger experience, but also open up new revenue opportunities, not only for the airport, but for other commercial and technology partners that they were already involved in. So the message is that we started with a very complex set of challenges with many, many variables interconnected. And we ended up with a very clear value chain, in fact, 2 or 3 clear value chains, where the airport itself as a business could select the segment of the value chain where it wanted to participate and where it wanted to outsource or partner for other elements of it, while maintaining the focus on the value to the customer as a final target. So, moving on from smart cities. This isn't an airport. This is the Amazon rainforest. And the second little case study I wanted to go through, which is right at the heart of impact investing, is the Amazon rainforest and the pressures that it's under. It's not only forest, of course, it's a community. It's home to many thousands of people under intense, sometimes intense social and certainly economic pressures. Young people who might wish to find opportunities in the rainforest and in their with the drawing on the experiences and what's passed down to them are tempted away by the mining companies and the logging companies. And communities are hollowed out. And traditional skills which have kept communities vibrant in the past are disappearing. And this has a directly detrimental effect on the health of the rainforest itself, of course, and the flora and fauna that call it home. And then, of course, there's the existential threat of biodiversity loss and climate change accelerated through the burning of rainforest. So 5 years ago, I got involved with a company called EBCF, translates as the Brazilian Rainforest Conservation Company. It owns the first privately owned reserve in the Amazon rainforest, which is fully accredited with RED certification for carbon credits and a number of other certifications as well, and had developed very close relationships, good relationships with the Amazonas state governments and other more local municipal leaders and regional leaders who are quite often at odds with the national government of Brazil, which doesn't have the best reputation for looking after the Amazon. The reserve is currently 50,000 acres, and our target is to increase that area substantially. And it's home to 3,000 people, and the people are absolutely at the heart of what the company is trying to do. And what are we trying to do? We're developing new value chains, just like the airport, of ecosystem services and other business-related activities that fundamentally make it more profitable to look after the rainforest and the people living there than to allow it to be cut down for various reasons. So we have a social environmental mission, which is very clear, with a percentage of any profits going to support projects within the communities. And a lot of those are focused on education, but also basic infrastructure, healthcare, clean water, and so on. There are a number of revenue streams we've identified. As you'll see here, sustainable harvesting of non-timber products, carbon credits, CSR, individual social responsibility, ecotourism is an interesting opportunity, scientific research and technology development. Now, as an entrepreneur, and as entrepreneurs collectively involved in this company, we explored a number of these because sometimes you just have to try things, right? And not see how they work necessarily, but definitely see which are going to take you to your targets most efficiently and effectively. And emerging from these activities, sustainable harvesting, carbon credits and technology development really came to the fore. And what's particularly interesting from an impact investment point of view, I think, is how these activities are linked and connected together. So, and let me explain that. If we think about the challenges or the hurdles in developing these particular commercial activities in this context, selling products, which means in our case getting appropriately tested and packaged and labeled food products, in this case, onto supermarket shelves, and this is a UK supermarket shelf, takes significant amount of effort and investment. And the reassurances that supermarket chains need for this kind of product are around volumes and capacity. Can you supply the volumes we're going to need if things go well? The reliability of supply, so can you supply through our selling season or through the periods of the selling year where we want to focus? The transparency and efficacy of the work you're doing. The Amazon rainforest and the communities there, it's a critically important environment and part of the world. It's also a place where there have in the past been unscrupulous businesses and a lot of corruption and lots of other challenges. So we have to maintain it's critical to be absolutely transparent, particularly when it comes to the measurement of what we're doing, the reporting of it, and allowing third-party verification of it as well. And this measurement, reporting, and verification is something you'll see more and more of in the world of impact investing, because it's maturing as more and more investors and more money gets attracted into these kinds of opportunities. Selling carbon credits also has particular challenges and hurdles we want to address. The opportunity is clear, and you'll have seen, no doubt, these sorts of stats before. The value or the price per ton of carbon has almost doubled in the last year. That's the graphic on the left. And if you look at UK government projections on the right, you'll see a very significant increase predicted up to 2050, where the price is predicted to be approaching $200 per ton, which is a very significant shift in the market. So how do you approach that? How do you make sure that you can get hold of some of that market share for your carbon credits? Well, it's actually the same list as for food. It's about volumes and capacity. Because if you're talking to a large company that is interested in buying carbon credits to offset its own carbon emissions, those carbon emissions from the company will be related to particular long planned, heavily invested activities. So they want to make sure that those carbon credits are going to be available at the time that they need it. So the reliability of supply, the transparency and efficacy, absolutely critical, as well as the MRV. Now, carbon credits have a bit of there are mixed reviews around carbon credits. Carbon credits are not ideal for saving global warming, because ultimately those with the deepest pockets can buy their way out of the problems they're creating, and a net zero is as good as you can ever hope to get, and it's unlikely that will be the case. The important point and the valuable point about carbon credits is that it's a step on the road. It's a step on the way to a more mature marketplace, and more investment coming in through the increased price of carbon in the market will help to finance more and more companies with innovative ways to tackle climate change. So I think that's the important point here. Now, I've been long fascinated, certainly for the last few years, in how we might transfer some of these technologies that have been developed for cities into more natural settings. And so from EBCF's point of view, we're developing an innovation strategy which essentially opens up the reserve as a living lab and a test bed for adjacent science and technologies, adjacent to zoology and botany and biology and the areas that you would imagine immediately, to big data, sensor and drone technologies, robotics, satellite imagery, 3D modeling, and more. And that's for two reasons. First of all, it's about developing new intellectual property, ourselves as EBCF, but also with partner companies who might want to use this. Incidentally, there's a lot of technology being developed in Cambridge and in the UK more generally that's very relevant to this. We work closely with a robotics group at Imperial in the Dyson School, for example, who focus on mimicking nature in robotics, in soft robotics, with some very interesting applications we can maybe talk about in the Q&A. But beyond that, there are many other technology commercialization opportunities in connected with the rainforest. AR and VR will help people engage with the rainforest, no matter where they are in the world. There's a real need for micro-scale manufacturing processes that will help us with our product reliability and supply reliability challenges I mentioned. Drone and robotic technologies are also particularly important when it comes to reporting. So when we think about this natural asset valuation challenge, this is closely linked to the value of carbon in the market. And as the market matures, the better we can get at measurement, reporting, and verification, the more accurate the pricing can be or the valuation can be of natural assets. So if you're an investor, you want to know that your dollar being invested in the Amazon rainforest or in any other sensitive natural environment is not only going to have the environmental and social impact that you wanted, but the value of your investment is going to increase in a predictable way. And one way to help to ensure that is to use technology to monitor it and measure it. So one immediate crossover, very broadly, is the world of digital twins as applied to urban development, but then applied to the natural environment like rainforests. Rainforests are hugely more complex than urban environments. So we might want to focus, for example, on species of tree that are particularly effective in carbon sequestration as one particular asset class. And we use technology to explore that. Now, what that enables us then to do is to map more clearly where are the value chains, what is the route from investment to profit from an impact investment point of view through this complex web of interrelated activities. And then finally, we began to realize a little while ago that these initiatives and these avenues we were taking were starting to have quite an impact, getting a lot of attention, bringing in investment, which is great, but we weren't quite yet at the top of the food chain. And the biggest lever is to start to control the way in which investment is made. And we're doing that in one or two different ways. We're in the process of launching a bank. You can have a look at the website. It's a kind of holding website at the moment. This is initially a Brazilian bank, digital full service bank, which is focused on the EBCF mission, as I've described it, with a percentage of profits going to support projects in the Amazon. And it also addresses the specific Brazilian problem of a large proportion of the population being unbanked, so not having access to banking facilities. So having a bank seems to make sense when we think about our own value chain and extending into areas where we can have a maximum impact. And then I also wanted to mention we have an Amazon Protection Foundation, which is a US not-for-profit. So we're not forgetting the philanthropic donation avenue, critically important. And then to come later this year is a payment token, the Amazonians green coin. So we're moving into the idea of not quite currency, but certainly the opportunity to increase finance through the use of financing of projects through the use of a branded payment token, which will interact with the bank as well. So, final slide, penultimate slide, my kind of top level thoughts. First of all, when it comes to impact investing for and the opportunity for entrepreneurs, context is everything. Everything is connected. The critical challenge is to find your route through those things to the profit. What does that look like? What are you going to put on the invoice every month? And how is that going to impact or help support the outcome you ultimately wanted to achieve? And then you've got to demonstrate it. You've got to be able to have, auditors in whatever form they are, poking around and being able to demonstrate efficacy of your activities. And that's it. So thank you for your patience. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to apologize for David, you're muted. David, you're muted. You're muted.
Oh no. Yeah,
it's not just me.
All right, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. So yeah, I've got a couple of questions for you. We're going to spend a couple of minutes looking at those questions, and then later on, we're going to move over to our audience. And so I can't say this enough. Just keep the questions coming. We'll be able to take them as we go along. And just before that, I just wanted to mention that Wolfson Entrepreneur Society is running an enterprise competition. and anyone is actually qualified to kind of enter for that. Although we've said that we need to focus on student, alumni, staff members of Cambridge University. But if you think that you are none of this, but you have a friend who is a Cambridge student or who is a graduate of Cambridge, and you personally do not have any ties with Cambridge, you can actually enter the competition, but a member of the Cambridge University community must be part of your team. So the deadline is on Friday. Please and please feel free to enter for the competition. You've got a whole lot of access. You have access to mentorship, people who could potentially invest in your idea, and then you might also win the prize that we've set for that. Okay, so that is that. I think the first question I wanted to ask is probably going back to the topic itself about impact investing. So on your own view, I know you've touched about this, but I kind of tied it up with another question. What is impact investing really? And why does it matter? Why should I care? Why should anyone out there care about impact investing?
It's a great question, and you'll probably get a slightly different answer to it from every impact investor out there. But I mean, very basically, it's investing in projects or in companies where the social and/or environmental outcome is as important as the financial outcome. But as I was saying, I think it's a mistake to think that the social and environmental outcomes in some way outweigh the financial outcome, because the return on investment is just as important. In some ways even more so, because impact investment can be met with some skepticism sometimes from more traditional investors, because they think, well, it's probably a weaker business case, or it's more of a philanthropic play or whatever, and that might be fine. But actually, the best impact investments are those where there is very significant opportunity for upside. But it's the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. So why should we care? Well, some people don't, and a lot of people don't care, and they're just happy to make the money and do the financial engineering and that kind of thing. And then there've always been others, of course, who really do and will only invest in things where there's a positive socio-economic or environmental outcome. However, what's changing is that it's almost becoming a lower risk investment opportunity if it has an impact investment element to it. And we see this in initially for people like pension funds, who have been taking this view for quite a long time, because they see the long-term risk of investments. The long-term risk, particularly obvious things like real estate or infrastructure investment. If you're a pension fund or a bank and you look at a project and there's going to be a material impact from climate change in some way in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, then that increases the risk significantly of that project, and it's less likely to get funded or receive an investment. Whereas if there's a more rounded approach and the risk is lowered, then it becomes more attractive. And it's not only the financial risk, it's increasingly risk of brand association with projects that have a disastrous environmental outcome or a bad environment or a bad social outcome. So it's becoming important because it makes business sense, and that's more and more the case.
Awesome. So, sometimes people say that we are where we are right now when we come to the issue of climate changes because we didn't start considering the impact of human actions on the environment. And so this has actually led to multinationals looking at corporate social responsibilities, trying to see how they can give back to the society, because there is always this impact of the actions of these businesses. So when you look at an entrepreneur, someone who is just trying to start from the scratch to build an idea, build a product, launch that into a business, there's always this stiff competition with already established businesses, probably trying to solve the same problem and all of that. And now, if you are trying to tell an entrepreneur to start considering the sustainability of the environment with respect to whatever you are doing, some people might find it like extremely difficult to be able to compete favorably and then still consider all of this. So on that basis, I was going to ask, what do you think is the future of entrepreneurship and sustainability?
So I think they're inextricably linked. The first thing is that a new company has zero carbon footprint by definition. So you've got a big advantage over any existing incumbent. That's the first thing. Second thing is that sustainability, it's not only measured environmentally, it's about the sustainability of the business model. So it comes back to the investment point I was making earlier, but it's also about the sustainability of the business model more generally in the competitive marketplace that it's entering. So I touched a little bit on the complexity of the world and how everything's interlinked, and how all of that, to bring more complexity, all of that is changing. And because of technology, these changes are happening faster and faster and faster. Now, the great strength an entrepreneur has or a young company has is they can be fleet of foot. They can move quickly. They can respond. And if the company or the entrepreneur can see the broader picture, if they can see the context, then they can see, it's not just a case of catching the wave. It's just being just in front of it. So I can't remember the guy's name, a well-known business academic, wrote a paper called Skate to Where the Puck is Going. And that's what you need to do as an entrepreneur. Know where the puck's going and skate there. You don't skate to the puck where it is, you skate to where it's going. And the world of investment and the world more generally is moving towards impact investment. And that's where the entrepreneur has the best competitive advantage. Now, there's another question about, well, what happens 3 or 4 years out when you've gone from 2 people to 50 people and suddenly you're a company and you're one of those guys that you used to talk about as being too slow and sluggish. Well, that maintaining that responsiveness as the business grows is still about just seeing how the markets are moving and seeing how to respond. And something I've learned, to be honest, is don't shoot for the moon, shoot for the stars and you'll hit the moon, because if you too quickly start to focus on tactical solutions because investors are kind of pushing you in that direction, then you will get swallowed up. Doesn't mean you can't be a fast follower, but actually, don't be afraid to just go out there, because what's to lose?
Awesome. I think you probably touched the next question I was going to ask, which is, how would you imagine the dynamics of potential investment for startups from now on? So I think you mentioned this when you try to say, look at where things are going and kind of follow that. So maybe if you can spend a couple of seconds as well to touch on this.
Well, there's a challenge. I mean, there is a challenge in geographical addressing different markets depending on what you're trying to do. So yes. If you're a pure digital startup, if you're writing code, then it's easier. If you're engaging with the physical world, and in the Brazilian case is an interesting one, because if you're based anywhere outside of Brazil, it is very difficult to do business for various reasons, tax reasons, distrust, all sorts of things. The bank, which is the bank sounds like a big old man, big company old man setting up this thing. It's not. It's brand new, very diverse team, really exciting, bunch of entrepreneurs. But it's got to be in Brazil, and the leadership, executive team have to be Brazilian. It's just the way the world operates in that market. Now the board can be more international. But if we want to extend that banking capability into other countries, then we need other banking licenses in other geographies. So the dynamics of startups in when it comes to impact investment, particularly if you're thinking about social challenges in different countries or environmental challenges in different parts of the world, is find the right partners locally, because that's going to be critical. You might have the best idea in the world, but if you don't have the right partnership to land it in the right way and grow it, then it's not going to go anywhere. And of course, implicit in that is the fact that for any entrepreneur, it's your baby and you want to keep, and your baby is beautiful, and nobody, you can't, nobody's going to tell me my baby is ugly because I've nurtured this baby. But sometimes your baby's ugly and somebody else has got to tell you, and somebody's got to help you with that baby if it's going to grow and survive. And so you've got to recognize that the end goal is what's important. It's not the fact you've got to, you're CEO of a company.
Exactly. I completely agree with you on that. And so I'm going to move a little bit to looking at smart cities. It's something you touched during your presentation. Okay, beyond that, there was something you also said about big challenges, meaning big opportunities, right? So I know that right now there are still a whole lot of challenges that are facing smart cities. I could remember 2 years ago, I had this conversation with a BP because they were kind of interested in looking at how quantum computer, a role that quantum computer could play in building smart cities. And because that's my field of research, we kind of have a conversation in that area like 2 years ago. So on that note, I'm now looking at opportunities that smart cities could actually present to entrepreneurs. So what are the possible opportunities that you think smart cities are going to present to entrepreneurs?
Right, so it's such a huge range of opportunity, to be honest. I think right now, I'm involved with 1 or 2 companies in the sort of environmental air quality and water quality spaces. And COVID has really accelerated their development. And that's for 2 reasons. One is that a healthier living environment and access to clean water and clean air is seen to be a real, it has a big effect on how well you go withstand something like COVID in the city where you're living. And it's very clear that the severity with which COVID has affected populations is not about density. It's not actually about environmental factors. It's about it's about economic factors. The poorer you are, the more likely you are to get ill and die from coronavirus. That's the first thing. The second reason why they've accelerated is that there's something in the psyche and the zeitgeist of the investor community at the moment, which wants a brighter, greener, cleaner future. And anything that speaks to that ambition, people are more and more interested in. And it comes back to, you have to remember, investors are human beings. They're individuals like everybody else. And suddenly everybody wants access to green spaces. They want more exercise. I talk to people who are sort of late 20s, early 30s. A year and a half ago, they were saving up for an apartment in the middle of a city. Now they're not really sure whether they want that kind of life, actually. The property prices in out-of-town, more rural areas is going up. So the opportunities for entrepreneurs in smart cities is really the technology stuff and the utilities and connected infrastructure and sensing and IoT. I love all that stuff. And that's all there as a toolkit. But the thing with technology is it's an amplifier of intent, and that's all. So if you think of what's your intent is to make cleaner, safer places where people are going to be happy, healthy, want to raise a family, are going to create jobs. So for an entrepreneur, what ideas, what solutions, what products and services are going to help to propagate those kinds of investments and those kinds of development.
Awesome. So I was going to ask about, because this was a conversation I had with a friend about smart city, and he was like, what is it really going to look like? Is it going to be different from the New York City of today or the London of today and all of that? But because of time constraint, I'm going to jump that question to start looking at what you think. Do you think that the focus on tech would mean a total solution for green future? Because a friend of mine had argued, for instance, the blockchain technology of a thing, Bitcoin mining and all of that, the energy that is required to actually mine Bitcoin is another problem on its own. It requires energy. Where are you going to get that energy from? So looking directly at the blockchain technology, it looks as if, okay, it's fine, it's green in nature, but indirectly, it might not be. So on that note, do you think the focus on tech would mean a total solution for a green future?
It's a fascinating question. So first of all, of course, blockchain and cryptocurrencies aren't the same thing, but they do both consume a lot of energy. And blockchain does have an important role. I was talking about transparency and the ability to trace transactions in supply chains, and blockchain clearly has an important role to play. Cryptocurrencies, well, there are different technologies, of course. Not all cryptocurrencies need to be mined in real time, and so the token that we're developing with the Amazonians Green Coin is not Bitcoin mining. It's producing tokens. So it's a different solution for the same kind of outcome. So the focus on tech, I think it's which tech would be the first thing to think about. So if you go back to what's your ultimate outcome, it's a green future. So it's clearly self-defeating to focus on technology, which is a huge carbon footprint, because you just do the math, and suddenly the graphs cross 10 years out, and you're a millionaire, but you've wrecked the environment. So that doesn't work. So pick the tech and find technology that is going to accelerate you in the way you want to go, but obviously not at the expense of the environment. And that takes me to the second point, which is, or a couple of other points. One is, where is the energy coming from? So EVs are a case in point. OEM's going to stop producing petrol and diesel engines or cars in the next few years. That's fine, but the electricity's got to be green, because if it's coming out of fossil fuel power stations, then it's just the same problem with a different wrapper. And then the final point I'd make is that energy consumption, energy production and consumption are getting much closer together, like lots of things. So local energy generation and consumption on demand, just in time, energy as a service, that kind of approach, I think will help with the carbon footprint of technology. So that's the other thing for opportunity for entrepreneurs, is really think local. And if you look at companies like Toyota, have been doing this for years. They have a house that charges the car when the car gets home, and and it's a balanced system. But whether it's energy production or food consumption and supply, a number of different areas are moving to a much more localized model. And I think that's where technology can have a part to play, is ensuring you get the outcomes you want, but not at the expense of the environment.
Okay, so just because of time constraint, we have just like 4 minutes, and then we can move over to the questions. I've seen a lot of questions coming from audience. I know this might be tricky, really. We are talking about smart cities, but a whole lot of people would prefer the natural habitat. So smart city, our natural habitat, where and how do we find a balance?
It's a great question. We need to find a balance, and as I was saying before, there's increasing evidence in the market that the public, ultimately the customers, want to find that balance. Now, I'm involved in a project in the UK, in the West Midlands of the UK, called the West Midlands National Park. And the first thing to say is this is not a national park in the traditional sense. Those of you watching, and certainly Wolfson will know, national parks are Dartmoor, and they're big. You pay for the car park, and it's a big definable place. The West Midlands National Park is named like that to be deliberately counterintuitive. The West Midlands is the heart of the Industrial Revolution. It's got big, dirty cities in it. It's got ugly planning decisions. It's got polluted waterways, but it has enormous and huge potential. And the project is actually rooted in landscape architecture as a discipline. And it's focused on the huge basin of the West Midlands and the rivers and the waterways that are there. And there's a landscape architect called Professor Catherine Moore, who's been leading on this for a number of years. And she's been drawing maps for many years of the West Midlands with no roads, no cities, no human infrastructure at all, just the natural environment. And the idea starts with the notion of exposing the green, and exposing the natural environment and the waterways and the rivers, which are concreted over and hidden away and so on. But it's also about helping people to connect and reconnect with their local culture and the history and the traditions of where they live. And what is it that makes a place home? You know, your question you didn't have time for was, why is New York different from London, is different from Tokyo, is different from Shanghai? Because they're different places. That's it. You know, what's smart in one place isn't smart somewhere else. It's about what makes it home. And so bringing nature into cities and exposing nature and giving nature space. And we start, you know, you see in COVID with cars being taken off the streets, and suddenly you have cafes and people walking around a pedestrianised area where previously there were cars. Well, build on that, right? So it takes a combination of local government and municipal support. It takes investment, but investors. There's entrepreneurs. There's a project running in New York with investors and entrepreneurs rethinking, reimagining shop fronts, because shops have been decimated with COVID. So how can I use the public realm that I have and the shop frontage and digital technologies to reimagine my business? And so that's the opportunity for entrepreneurs, is to balance cities and habitat, so that actually cities become a pleasant place to be and not something you have to endure.
Awesome. Okay, so if you can just spend maybe a minute or less, because we're already running out of time, for this last question. I have got a whole lot, but we need to look at the questions that our audience are asking. So do you think we need more legislation to support entrepreneurs as we look towards sustainable finance and investing in general?
It's like legislation is like politicians. It should either help or get out of the way. So I think for me personally, less legislation is always better, mainly because it's always too late. Legislation is usually about codifying developments and technologies that have been in the market for a period of time. You know, it's a bit like, and I apologize to researchers who are on this session, but it's a bit like academic research, which captures and codifies things that have been in practice already. Now, so legislation, I think legislation around tax incentives and incentives for investors who are investing in sustainable projects, yes, absolutely. But only when a market failure can be clearly identified. Now, of course, we're moving into a period. We're in a period where the public sector, certainly in the West and internationally, you have to assume there's no money. Taxes are going to go up. It's bad, you know. So I come back to my earlier point, really, is that if the business makes commercial sense, then it'll get investment. And what I haven't said so far, there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of investment, huge amount of investment, looking for great projects. The problem is liquidity. The investors aren't finding the projects. So that's another hour's conversation. But
okay, awesome.
Less legislation, not more.
Yeah, good, great insight you've got there, Robin. So why don't we move over to the questions that our audience have got for us? Thomas, if you can start bringing them in. Okay, so the first one, hello everyone. If the technology that can counteract global warming is out there, that can create a strategic inflection point, then what is holding it back? Is it just corporatism? Thank you. So what do you think?
It's a great question. If I knew it was out there, I wouldn't be wasting my time on this call. I'd be investing in it. But I think it's almost always either the route to market or the fact that corporations are making more money from doing things like they've always done at the moment, and they haven't reached that inflection point, as you say in the question, that hurdle that means they'll make more money from doing something differently. So a case in point is electric vehicles. Electric vehicle technology is very basic stuff. You know, battery technology needs to get a lot better, but batteries and the technology around the vehicle itself, extremely well established, really robust. The two big barriers to it are automotive OEMs make a lot of money from making cars the way they always have. It's a super tanker. It's engineered to do that and do a lot of it and make money out of it. And that's what they do. And it takes a big investment to switch it. Legislation and social attitudes are starting to change that. I think the technology and solutions are out there. It's partly about that crossing that threshold when it makes more sense to invest in something differently. It's clearly an opportunity for entrepreneurs.
Awesome.
Sorry, I was just going to mention Tesla. Tesla never was a car company. Tesla was always a battery and a data company.
Exactly. Awesome. Okay, so thank you. This is another intriguing question to me, to be honest. What are your thoughts on investment efforts to go to the Mars, or trying to see what's out there being pursued or uploaded, yet that same financial effort can go to driving smart cities on Earth?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and I kind of flip-flop between thinking what a waste of money and what an exciting thing. I think smart cities. Do you know? By the way, I hate the word smart cities. I mean, what's the alternative? Let's build a dumb city, right? It's just a redundant word. So, but I do think hard about it when they're looking for signs of life on Mars, when we're in the process of destroying everything we've got here.
Yeah.
And at some point there'll be a colony on Mars, but if we, the time frames for that, it's going to be way too late for us to do anything about where we are already. So I think there are clearly scientific advances and developments to be had from the Martian exercise, and there are lots of great technologies and innovations that have happened through space technology over the years, no question. And areas like satellite technology, even the internet was a US military invention in the first place, driven by, Kennedy's let's go to the moon, without knowing how they were going to do it, or even why, maybe. So it's it's an exciting thing. I think the only other thing I'd say is it cost about 10% of the UK's track and trace. And I'll leave that there.
Okay, so thank you, Sandile, for that interesting question. So I'll move to Rachel. Rachel have said, how does the technology aspect of smart cities intersect with politics, religion, culture, and others? Can tech development be sufficient without conscious changes to the way of life?
Rachel, that's a great question. No, they can't. As I said before, technology is a set of tools only, and cities are about politics, religion, culture, and people, and the way that people want to live their lives. And as I said before, technology is an amplifier of intent. So how do you want to live? People don't go and live in London because the Wi-Fi is good, although that might be a problem if it's not. But they go because of the social life and the job opportunities and the cinemas and the theatres and the same as Cambridge. There are more technologically advanced cities than Cambridge, believe it or not, in the world. But it doesn't mean they're necessarily a better place to be or raise a family. So for an entrepreneur, politics, religion, culture, day in the life of, that's really what makes it important. Awesome.
Okay, so I guess we could go to the next one, Takanori Kashino. Wolfson Pro Society High. I'm a student studying business management at Wolfson, and I'm also an angel investor in Japan. Welcome. Okay, so the question, what is a good way to find an opportunity in the UK for impact investing, particularly for startups as an angel investor? If you know any platform, events, or opportunities to know about or meet the startups, I'd love to know.
Thanks for that question. It's a really good one, and it comes back to the point I was making earlier about the challenge of connecting investors with projects.
Yeah.
And with impact investing, the challenge is they're very local, very localized for good reason. So particularly, well, I was going to say social or economic, but even environmental projects, I think the best place to look is very locally. I'd suggest talk to the college, look in the university, the city council. Look local. Look, it doesn't have to be. I talked about the Amazon and stuff, and it all sounds very exotic, but actually the same opportunities are going to be right there on the doorstep. You just got to wear out some shoe leather, and when you're allowed to go and talk to people without a mask, go and talk to people and find some local opportunities. And in fact, it often starts with kind of volunteering or giving your time in kind. I mean, the EBCF thing and all the Brazilian stuff, nobody's getting a salary yet. We're all investing time. You just got to put the effort in, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. There's no shortcut, I'm afraid.
And just to add to that, Thomas, maybe you can put in Wes' email so that Takanori can see that. I've got some network at Judge Business School, which I can also kind of connect you to. I've got a lot of people with amazing ideas and startups that are looking for funding. And then the second thing is the Wolfson Enterprise competition, which is going to happen later in April, once the application is closed. We are also trying to bring in investors, people who want to invest in ideas, to come to the competition and listen to the pitches. So that might be another way to kind of look at what is possible. You might be able to find an idea that you might be interested to kind of invest in. Okay, so Thomas, can we go to the next question? Hi, Daniel. What areas do you think regulation required to kind of bring markets for other SDGs? Like what Carbox tax carbon credit does or doing to the carbon market?
So thanks for that. I think again, as I was saying before, the less regulation, the better, really. I think for regulators, the challenge needs to be to find it's just like investing, really. It's about identifying the outcome you want to achieve and legislating to support it, or legislating to prevent an unintended consequence. Now, that's difficult because in these complex challenges we're facing, and things like carbon markets and the way the carbon market is developing, it's difficult to predict what unintended consequences are going to be. It's kind of self-evidently. And so what regulation? I think it's safeguarding. I think my answer would be the regulation needs to be a safety net to prevent people getting hurt or prevent progress in the wrong direction, and then let the market figure out how to get most quickly towards viable solutions. Legislators will never find those.
Exactly. I agree with that. So yeah, the next, how do we get to a standard way of measuring ESG impacts to assess investment?
That's
really interesting.
That's a great one. That's a great question. A standard way. I think it's going to come through better reporting, better measurement and verification and reporting of impact, because it's not without the data and without that kind of critical mass of data, it's difficult to assess investments. So if you're investing in something that's well understood, then you've got a lot of market data to look at, and you've got benchmarks and surveys and stuff like that. For very immature, I mean, of all the ESG kind of investments, the price of carbon and carbon credit type investments are among the easiest, because it's kind of becoming a bit of a commodity. When you think a bit more broadly, these things are so closely interconnected. It's difficult. So again, I think the thing is going to be what's the ultimate outcome, and it'll be it's not always easy to find. My London City Airport, the outcome was a happier customer who likes to fly through the airport, not I want 10% off my pizza because my flight's delayed. You know that. So it's figuring that out. In the Amazon, the ultimate outcome is probably be better educational outcomes for the kids at school, because if you trace that back through all the decisions and things that would need to happen, they're the measures you need to deploy to enable that.
Exactly. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, let's take this, then I can go back to more other questions before we try to wrap up. Okay, so where is this? Sorry. With how popular green company is, like Tesla, Blink, ChargePoint, and all that, do you think that financial markets are originally internalizing positive externality of sustainability? Will this trend continue?
It's a good question. Are they organically internalizing positive externalities? Yes, but it's not quite there yet. It's something that markets are responding to. The interesting thing about markets is I learned, but 20 years ago, I was working at Cambridge, I was working at Wolfson running an executive master's program. And we took people from manufacturing businesses on a tour of London, and we went to some analysts who control the share price. You know, they control how much your pension is worth and everything. And the students, they were all sort of late 20s, early 30s. They were amazed by the fact that these analysts were younger than they were. And they they came to their conclusions by reading the Financial Times that morning and talking to a colleague over a coffee. It wasn't some kind of deep Zen-like meditation they went into to come up with what's the best price to pitch at. It's a very human it's a very human process. So they're figuring it out. The hope is that it becomes more and more organic. And I think it will. 5 or 10 years from now, it just won't be a conversation.
Awesome. So there is another interesting question, from Lassa again. So what are your thoughts about biotech, such as plant machine and animal machine interfaces, interactions with regards to smart environments?
So two parts to the answer. Fascinating area. On the negative side, or where there needs to be caution, of course, is where if there's any sort of genetic manipulation that might interfere with the natural order of things. We're doing enough of that through pollution and through other unintended interventions with the natural world. So that would be my kind of health warning. On the other hand, I mentioned the soft robotics group at Imperial. There's a huge amount left to be learned about the natural world, the plant and animal kingdoms, that can be applied directly in technology. And we're only just scratching the surface. It's relevant to the question about Mars earlier. We know so little about our oceans, for example, so little. And there's so much exploration to be done. And with the Amazon, we know we're probably cutting down future, cures for other pandemics without even knowing it was there in the first place. So plant machine, animal machine interfaces and interactions with regards to smart environments. Lots of technology opportunity, a bit of a health warning around how it might impact natural systems. When it comes to the effects of human health on how smart environments function and the use of smart environments to monitor human health, huge growth opportunity, especially right now with coronavirus. It's right up. And the market's febrile. If you go to the west coast of the US, they're investing in all sorts of weird ideas. And a lot of those will disappear, but it is a big growth area.
Awesome. Okay, so before I give you a couple of minutes to kind of wrap up your thoughts and everything you've said, I just wanted to let you know that it's not just entrepreneurs that are probably going to be watching this. There are a whole lot of people who want to probably tomorrow venture into businesses, work for other people, get employed elsewhere and all of that. But then we also want to make sure that the dynamics of whatever we offer here is something that anybody across platform can actually use. So someone actually sent me a chart about the issue of making career decision and where things are going from here. So for instance, do you think that this kind of person should be worried about his or her career path if such a career path is still following the old and maybe the sustainable route? What can this person do?
It's a good question, and it takes you into the field of, sort of corporate intent. So corporate social responsibility is sort of fading as the driving force, and it's sort of more about corporate intent. You know, what's in the DNA of the business. And I suppose the thought process is, you know, when you go to bed all night or you're in the shower and you're employed, you're working for a company. Am I comfortable in my guts with what the company's doing? Does it make me feel proud? If I speak to my future self or my grandchildren ask me, what did you do to help save the planet? What would my answer be? Now, as entrepreneurs are in a very privileged situation, you know, and those of us who can do what we enjoy doing are incredibly privileged, and we mustn't lose sight of that. And it's not always easy to shift jobs and shift careers. But I think in the same way that it's important that companies and corporations have an intent, individuals can have an intent as well. So as long as people are alive to how they're feeling and the kind of impact they'd like to have as an individual, then when an opportunity presents itself, they'll be in a position to act on it.
Awesome. So I think that will be the end of today's program. We're just right on time, 7:30 on the dot. So if I could give you just a couple of seconds to wrap up your thoughts and say a final word to our audience before we close.
Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity. It's been really exciting. It will be even better if we were all in the same room, and hopefully one day before too long that's going to be possible. Impact investing is a big growth opportunity, but it's really the manifestation of a much bigger opportunity in the way that the world is moving, and that's thinking about things beyond oneself and thinking about how can I make a difference as an individual. And the great thing about a place like Wolfson is that it's the best kind of platform to allow that and enable that. So anybody on the call who's connected with the college or with Cambridge more generally, or who is motivated just to be in this conversation, wherever they're from, the future is ours. And you know what? This is our watch. It's down to us to make something happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you. So thank you to our audience, everyone who's joined across the world, whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. I want to say a special thank you. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to remind you again that the Wolfson Entrepreneur Enterprise Competition is still on. The deadline for you to put in your application is next Friday, 19th of March. And then after that, we'll be able to kind of invite people for the final round for you to pitch for investors, mentors, people who are going to kind of help you. Even if you don't win the ultimate prize, you will still be able to get some other mentorship and even a possible investor investing in your business. Until then, I want to say, everyone, remain safe and don't always forget that we are always here to give you the content that will always help you pursue your future dream. Thank you all as we sign off today. Thanks.